Welcome to the Page Turnerz podcast, where book lovers unite to celebrate the enchanting world of fiction. With your host, Paul A. Brooks. In each episode, we'll dive into the captivating realms of storytelling, exploring the pages that transport us to magical places and introduce us to unforgettable characters. In each episode, we'll embark on a creative expedition through the minds of seasoned and emerging writers to unravel the mysteries and unveil the passion that fuels their stories. Join us on this odyssey through the pages and pixels of imagination, where words become worlds and stories illuminate our lives. So, pour yourself a coffee and immerse yourself in discussions about writing, gripping plots, heroes and villains, and the sheer joy of escaping into a well-crafted story.
On today's show, I talk to Ashley Postman from AspenEditorial. She offers editorial services to authors at all stages of their writing, from draft to publication. Now, we talked about how she works with authors, and she gave me some great advice about the bane of my writing life, commas. This is Ashley Postman. Hi, Ashley, and thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much. So we're going to talk about editing today. This is one of the things that scares the bejesus out of me, if I'm honest. And I think that's the same for most writers. We just seem to be terrified of editors and giving our baby over to somebody else. Now, I've spoken to editors before, and like you, they're not scary at all, very easy to talk to, which is great. But there is just this thing, isn't there, that it feels like you're just going to tear our world apart, and so it's quite terrifying. But as I've said before, you don't look terrifying at all, so that's quite good.
And that's a compliment, thanks.
Yeah, and you live on a farm, that's right, isn't it?
Yes, it is. For now, at least. Next month, when I get married, I'll be moving off. But
yeah, I said earlier on, just before I've come on, I've caught you at a really busy time. But as I said, congratulations for that, and I hope everything goes well and you have a great day. I'm sure you probably will, which is great. Fantastic. So let's talk about editing. Now, on your website, you talk about the fact that you do pretty much the whole spectrum, all the different types of editing, developmental, stylistic, which is what, line editing? Am I correct with that?
yeah, there's a few different names. Some editors call line editing a combination of stylistic and copy, and some just use it as another word for stylistic.
Right. Okay. Just to confuse us poor, humble authors a little bit more. And then, of course,
it confuses us editors too, because I'll look at other people's websites and be like, okay, which one is it? Is it just the one, or is it both?
I know. I suppose really at the end of the day, as long as we both get what we need, then it doesn't really matter what it's called, does it? So that's so you do copy editing and proofreading, and then you do a combination, a combo thing that I saw on your website. What's that about?
My combination is the stylistic and copy, because might as well say it straight. I find it's the only one that I can do as a combination, as it doesn't jeopardize the quality of my edit, because since I do it in one pass instead of different passes, I don't have that familiarity, which means I'd be missing stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then I just dock off the price because it's one pass anyways.
Yeah, sure. That's great. I mean, again, I suppose, as a writer, it's a kind of, we're always trying to spell correctly and have the right grammar and all that sort of stuff. But my bugbear is commas. What are they all about? I mean, seriously, they should be here or they should be there, and I'm taking them off here, and then they come. Do you know what? I give up. So I just rely on you guys to make sure I put them in the right place, which is good.
Well, the biggest hack for a comma is just the breath. When you're talking, like if you read your manuscript out loud, wherever you need a breath, a comma should typically go there.
Okay, great tip. Love that. I shall remember that one. That's great. Wherever there's a breath, there should be a comma. I think that's really good. That's great. And there's something else that you do as well. It says you do your first 3 chapters. You do a first 3 chapter edit. Is that just kind of a get to know each other kind of thing, or do you do that for free? I know you do the first 1,000 words for free, or you can do if someone speaks to you about that. So what's the idea behind the first 3 chapters edit?
Not all authors have enough money for a full edit.
Mm.
So I offer a stylistic copy combo edit for the first 3 chapters. That way they can kind of see what mistakes they make more and just get those tips and tricks for those self-editing passes.
I suppose
And
go on, sorry,
it's a
carry
great way
on.
to learn.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say that's a great thing to do. I think because one of the other things, other than terrifyingly handing over what we've spent a year to write to somebody else, I suppose having that those first 3 chapters at a at a rate that is more affordable, because editing can be quite expensive. So I suppose to a lot of people it can feel. I mean, as an indie author myself, when you've got to pay for everything, it is quite daunting. But we understand, and I certainly understand the value and the absolutely essentialness of having an edit done and an editor to work with, because it just improves your work so much. But that's a really nice thing to do. It's just kind of break it. Is that how you'd normally work? Do you break your costs down as like a payment plan sort of situation?
Um, I just tailor my costs to my authors. So if they need a payment plan, then I'm more than willing to work out one that will work for them. Otherwise, I do a 50% deposit, and then the rest of the cost is before I hand over the manuscript, just to kind of protect myself.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I mean, actually, one of the on the other podcast that when I spoke to editors, we did a live one. I started off with some quotes, and one of the quotes was from Ariel Levy, who's a New York Times bestselling author, and she said, "A real editor isn't just someone you work with; he or she is your guide." And that really resonated with me. And I think exactly from what you've just said is that flexibility and that willingness to work with the author. I think that goes an awful long way to give us more confidence in giving you our work, if you like. So I think that's a wonderful thing. Of course, on the other side of that, Leia Del Rey said, editing is like dieting, except a lot more violent. So when you look at it like that, that can be pretty scary. So, why do you, I mean, I've told you why I'm sort of afraid of editors, if you like, but why do you think people are afraid of handing over their work to you?
Couple of different reasons. One, nobody likes to be told what to do,
Right.
especially when it comes to something they've put their heart and soul into.
Yeah.
And of course, some authors call their work in progress their book baby. And the analogy of a baby isn't far off. They've
Yeah.
spent months working on their manuscript, sacrificed time and mental space to nurturing its growth, and are fiercely protective of it, rightly
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
So trusting someone with the product of your hard work isn't easy. Paying someone, typically a complete stranger, to pull apart what you're so deeply invested in, that's scary.
Yeah.
You you want to think you wrote well, the story makes sense, the characters have depth, and the narrative is interesting. And giving your book to someone who is trained to spot what's wrong instead of someone who just wants to read a good story is being committed to being told you made mistakes. Some big, some small, but mistakes all the same.
Yeah.
Add on to that the horror stories out there and the shared experience of, as you said, authors getting their manuscript back and it's just marked with red.
Yeah, yeah. I think from what you kind of said, really it is that it's kind of building that relationship up, really, isn't it? And making sure that we are working as really a team as opposed to an editor and a writer. I think we have to work quite closely together just to make sure that we can work well together, but equally so it doesn't feel like you are just pulling everything apart and just looking for errors, which I think is it kind of goes from school, doesn't it, with the red pen and fail written all over it, or an E or something like that, as opposed to an A. That's kind of how it feels. But yeah, I can imagine that, really. And that analogy, as with a baby, even makes it feel more precious as an author. So yeah, I kind of understand that. So how do you, when you're working with writers, how do you communicate with them? I think I read on your website that you're happy to sort of jump on a call like this, really, I suppose, and talk to them. Is that kind of normal for you? Is that the way you normally work?
When I edit, I do my best to explain what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So pretty much everything I do, unless it's something I've already explained or something that's repetitive or just straight punctuation, even punctuation I'll explain at times. It's here's the edit, here's why I made it, here's the rule behind it, and here's 2 to 3 examples of how it could be redone. But those examples I don't want the author to take because that's my writing
Right. Yeah.
and it's their book. So it's more of the way I operate is if somebody starts telling me something, then my brain can go, oh, no, 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 I don't want it that way. I want it this way. So that's why I offer all the examples, just so that they have that jump off point and go, wait, no, I want it this way.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm going for.
Yeah, that's great because again, you're allowing the author to keep their own voice then, I suppose, doing that. That's great. When you're doing developmental editing, how do you work through that? If you've got a developmental edit to go through, how do you do that? What's your process?
I kind of do it in a 3-step process. I have a bunch of documents that I have going. So I'll read through and I'll make notes as I go where my attention lagged, where something didn't make sense, if I see a plot hole. And then I'll create a document and have a summary for every single chapter. Just key points in each one, and then I'll kind of assess that, go over, hey, does this chapter actually have something that pushes the story forward, that develops the character?
Mm.
Or is it something that could be cut in so that we can increase the pacing and increase that just tension of the story? And then I'll write a letter. I'll tell the author what they did right so that they know, hey, yeah, I did really good at this. I can reapply it in these areas that are maybe weaker. And then I'll kind of pinpoint those areas that need some strength. I'll explain why, and I'll offer a few different suggestions for how to bolster that.
I really like that. I really like the fact that you offer a number of suggestions because that allows us then to look at it and go, as you said earlier on, now they want to go that way, I want to go that way. I think that's really good. So when you're doing a developmental edit, and you write, I'm assuming it's all done via email, or do you use software to communicate your sort of thoughts and processes to your authors?
I'm a super huge fan of Google Docs.
Yes, thank you. Me too. Yes.
I grew up on Word, but I like Google Docs. It's the way it's formatted is just easier for me to look at, and I think it's nicer to share it with authors because of how it shows all my edits and my comments.
Yeah, yeah, and you can have them all down the side, and it's all beautifully laid out. Love it. Love Google Docs. I know.
Yeah.
A lot of people I speak to, authors particularly, oh, Scrivener or something else that they'll use, or Word particularly. But no, I'm just a bit of a diehard Google Docs person, really. It's easy, it's there, and it's free.
And from Google Docs, you can convert it into a Word document and you can open Word documents on it. So it's very versatile.
Yeah, 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 absolutely it is. So how long would it take you to do a development edit? So let me give you an example of word count. Let's round it, say 100,000 words. How long would it take? I know that's awful. That's putting you on the spot, isn't it? So roughly, not holding you to it, but how long would you kind of take to do a developmental edit of 100,000 words?
Um, it's kind of complicated. Well, I like to give myself extra time. So for 100,000, that is a very big word count. For a developmental edit, that'd be more along the lines of 2 weeks. Maybe I can polish it in a week.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's no time at all, actually. I was thinking if you said 2 months, I might have been like, okay, but 2 weeks.
My full-time job. So
Yeah, 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 true, true. Okay, 2 weeks. That's pretty good, actually, because I mean, really, when you consider, you're going through when you're writing different drafts, it can often take months to go through that before you've got it to a point where I would be happy to give it to you, as clean as I could get it for you then to go through it. So 2 weeks, that's pretty good for a developmental edit. Yeah, Wow.
But my developmental edit's a bit different than other editors. Some
Okay.
editors have those inline comments throughout the entire manuscript, and they'll take sections and they'll move it themselves.
Right.
So I don't do that. I just write the letter. So it's what I do is more of a manuscript evaluation than a true in-depth developmental edit, which would
Hmm.
be more, that timeline would be a lot longer.
Yeah, I was going to say I can imagine that. But having said that, thinking about what you've just said and the way that you do it, I'm wondering whether or not that's perhaps better from the writer's perspective because it allows me, for example, to keep my voice in there. If there's so much all over it, then it could probably feel a little bit daunting. I know I get notes back, so I suppose similar to you, it's more of a, potentially an evaluation than a deep developmental edit. But that's fine because, you know, for me, it doesn't feel like I'm being told off. You know, that I'm putting the things in the right place or the wrong place, and I need to change this and I need to change that. No, I think that's fine. 2 weeks is amazing. That's really good. That kind of, because that's almost a comma. That's almost a breath, isn't it? Really, just to allow you as the writer just to take that pause to step away from it, because they do say that, you know, once you've written it, you should put it in a drawer for some time and then come back to it. But of course, I can't do that. I just write it and then rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it until I'm happy to hand it over. 2 weeks, that's really good. What about line editing then, or stylistic editing? What's your
For
process for that?
100,000?
Say again, sorry?
Well, I thought you were asking timeline. For 100,000 of a stylistic or line edit, that would
Yeah.
be that 3 weeks mark.
Okay. Okay. Well, you know, we're still only just over a month for those two, so that's pretty good. That's really. How do you do that? How do you do a line edit? What's the process you go through for that?
Oh, this is my favorite edit to do.
Good, good, good. Go on.
Well, my favorite's actually the combo edit because I see the mistakes for the copy editing and I'm like, oh, I should just fix those anyways. Um, it's as I was kind of explaining how I go through, and like stylistic edit looks at the sentence paragraph level, whereas
Mhm.
copy edit is looking at that punctuation kind of word level.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm looking at transitions between sentences and paragraphs and chapters. I'm looking at how the sentence is worded and if it makes sense right off the bat, or if my brain lags and goes, oh, wait, I need to reread this to actually understand it.
All right.
It's what I do is probably what some developmental editors do on the inline. I start moving stuff. So in a chapter, I'll see paragraphs and sometimes I'll splice them. I'll take 2, 3 sentences from one sentence from another, and I'll move those together. Or I'll offer that suggestion, hey, this was touched on 2 pages ago. It would be better if you moved this back up there to keep that subject as one and then be able to move forward.
Wow. Mm.
And yeah, all of those are done in comments. Some of it I do the reword in it so that they can either accept it or whatever, but my goal is always to keep as much of their words as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's good. Because you know, I think sometimes, I mean, when I look at, I mean, I know we shouldn't as authors, but I compare my style to, say, well, I don't know, Neil Shusterman, for example, who happens to be one of my favorite authors. Um, he, our styles are, I'd like to think, comparable, but you know, I can still hear his voice in his words, and I can still hear mine. So there is that distinction, which I think is really important to be able to keep that. And we sort of said that a few minutes ago, which is it's really important because otherwise it's not your work. And I think that's one of the things that AI, for example, could potentially start interfering with. I don't like the idea of that's not true. AI is useful to a degree, but I think there's no originality on it. So yeah, I won't go over that. I'll get on my soapbox about that in a minute, but so we'll gloss over that one. Um, So thinking about development editing and line editing, then, what are the kind of most common mistakes? I mean, I know you mentioned earlier on before we started talking that there were a few that you found. What are the most common ones? Because I think we are probably all guilty of, I would imagine, pretty much the same sort of ones, really.
Yeah, there's definitely quite a few, especially it doesn't really matter if you're a debut author or you've been doing it for a while. They're easy
Mm.
habits to fall into.
Yeah,
One of the bigger ones is if you're writing in first person point of view, the repetitive use of starting sentences with I.
yeah, yeah,
There's a lot of authors that will do like three sentences in a row that start with I.
yeah,
And even if the sentence subject is completely different in every single sentence, it'll start to sound repetitive because each one starts with I. And typically you're going more on the telling side than the showing side if you're
yeah,
starting with I.
yeah.
Because if you can start with other words, then it's pushing you to be more focused on description and interactions and just actions or dialogue. But if it's I, then it's all about me and what I'm doing. So
I suppose it
that's
can,
one.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I can imagine though, if you're almost then taking the reader out of the story, aren't you? If you do that, because you're just telling somebody what you are doing. So yeah, you are absolutely taking the reader out. Yeah, I can see that. That's really good. Any more? I've written that one down. So that's the first one.
Um, there's info dumping. All
Oh,
authors do it.
yeah,
Every single one. Especially in that first chapter when they're trying to describe the world and describe their characters. It's you can pick it out pretty easy as a reader when there's all of this description and all of these adjectives about your character. Instead of being like, oh yeah, her speckled face or her red hair whipped in the wind, adding red to it isn't, it glares out at you. You're like, oh, why is red there? Her hair
mm,
whipped in the wind. Why,
mm.
why is red? So it should be her hair glinted in the sunlight, like golden, I don't know.
I know what you're saying, but and absolutely right. Yeah, and I can see exactly what you're saying. Yeah, that's fine. That's really good. Again, because I have often I've sat, and most writers are probably the same. We've sat and pondered over a sentence for 15, 20 minutes, trying to find just the one word that fits in that makes the description come alive, as opposed to just telling it. So yeah, I see exactly what you're saying, and so that is info dumping. Really is. I catch myself doing it all the time. It's really frustrating. I should have somebody, my shoulders say info dump, and so we can get rid of it and all that sort of stuff. So that's the next one then. Would you say info dumping is the next one?
Yeah. But sometimes it's not that hard to fix. Sometimes it's just, oh, there's one paragraph that is completely describing the setting and my
Mm,
characters and what they're
mm.
doing. What if I took one sentence and moved it farther up? And the middle sentence kept it there, the last sentence moved it to the next page. What if I turned it into an observation in dialogue or the character interacting with it?
Yeah, yeah. That's a great way, isn't it? Put it in dialogue. That's
Yeah.
I suppose as long as it's not, I mean, with dialogue, really, you should kind of cut it to the bone as much as you can, so that it is, you know, you're not sort of stringing the chat out or the dialogue out. But yeah, put it in dialogue. That's a good way of doing it. What about flashbacks? If someone's sort of reliving the past as a flashback, is that something that you would pick up on as an editor?
Flashbacks are very difficult because you can get them really wrong and you can get them right.
Okay.
Um, Flashbacks are, you're playing a delicate game with your readers. You are trying to hook them on the narrative that's happening now. And all of a sudden, they're being chucked back in time.
Hmm.
So they now have to invest in something separate that may or may not be super related. So splitting that attention, you risk losing your reader's attention and risk losing the momentum that you've built up to that point. So if you're going to do a flashback, it needs to be super relevant and super important. Otherwise, use dialogue, use
Yeah.
it as a past trauma character, the reason why the character is the way they are. Do they have that raw moment with one of their friends? Do they bond over something in their past instead of having that flashback where you are actively taking them out of that one scene and putting them into something else?
Mm. Yeah. Wow. Great stuff. That's good. I've got that. Thank you. I have it written down. All right. So, and what else then? Anything else? Any others? I mean, I won't keep you because we could be here all day. So just one more. Let's do one more.
Um, I'd probably go repetition of previously conveyed information.
Right. Yeah.
That one gets used a lot. It's the common way of thinking of it is if you've explained it once and you find yourself explaining it again and again, you didn't explain it right the first time.
Right. Yeah.
Because you need to trust your readers to remember. If you can't trust them, they'll feel it. They'll read it and they'll start growing resentment. They'll be, well, why are you telling me this again? You've already told me. And I do see that in a lot of books where it's every chapter, even you get the same information, even if it's a character's self-doubt. I think this about myself, and so must think of me this way because of that. And there's only so much self-doubt and so much repetition a reader can do before they get fed up and they just quit.
Yeah, don't read the rest of it. Yeah, I think that's right, isn't it? Really, I think we have to make sure that we give the reader credit. You know, they're reading the book because they're interested in the story. That you may have given them that information, and you don't need to give it to them again. You know, allow them to weave it into the theatre that's going on in their mind. Yeah, that's great. Repetition. That's lovely. Okay, that's three really good tips there, which is great. Thank you for those. So that covers then developmental edit and line editing. What about copy editing? How do you go about doing that?
Copy editing is that grammar and punctuation level.
Mm,
So as I kind of said before with commas, it's that natural breath when you're reading it.
yeah.
So there are the rules of doing it as like the fanboys after for and but yet or oh geez, I did that out of order. This is
I know
what I
what you
get for
mean.
doing it off my head.
That's good though.
And so, because yeah, there's those specific ones that you pretty much almost always have a comma after.
Mm,
And then there's the ones where you set off a name, a character's name. It's typically a comma and then their name. But yeah, some of the other ones, when you're splitting up action within a sentence or you're listing a couple of things, some of that is that breath. It's okay, if I inserted a breath here, would it give more emphasis to the beginning and end of the statement?
mm.
Does taking that comma out make it read smoother? Does the flow work? Does it change how my sentences go so that there is that variety? Because yeah, there is the rules of where to put commas, but sometimes if you follow those rules, there's so many commas that you're taking a breath and just not the right places, and it can ruin that emphasis that you're really trying to go for.
Yeah, I agree with you absolutely. I mean, I use Grammarly. I have that sort of running in the background whilst I'm writing, and it will pop up with a little red line underneath or a blue line or whatever. And sometimes when it's suggesting a comma goes in there, and I'll read it and I think, really, a comma there? That doesn't seem to feel right. And I think that's why, you know, if you're using software or something like that, it may follow the rules exactly, but it doesn't really kind of understand context. It can't feel the flow of the writing or the flow of the sentence. So it might put a comma in, for example, comma in the maybe the technically the right place, but it messes up the sentence. Is that something that you see often in when you're going through manuscripts?
Especially in dialogue.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Well,
Hmm.
dialogue, if you start putting the rules in, as humans, we have all different speech patterns.
Yeah.
So if you start doing the commas and the punctuation exactly how it asks you, all of a sudden, all of your characters sound the exact same. And the way they are trying to say something, the emphasis that you're trying, the tone and the way they're speaking, it gets erased. So authors need to be super careful when they're using these softwares and the dialogue is, yeah, you put a comma here, you put a period here, you put this and that there.
Yeah.
Okay, did that just change my character's voice completely?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, it really can. I've noticed it myself. It really can change it, and I think you're absolutely right. You know, one of the big things when we're writing characters is that they need to be distinctive on the page. You know, a reader needs to be able to say, "Oh, that person is speaking because that's how they speak. That's, you know, that intonation is there." Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think that's the danger, isn't it, of software, that it might be technically correct, but it doesn't always make sense. It doesn't capture the sort of the feel or the emotion in what's going on in terms of what you're writing. That's really good. So in terms of moving on then from copy editing, so we're then looking at,
There's one more thing with copy
oh,
editing.
go for it, do it. Yeah.
We do a fact check for
Ah,
consistency. So the copy editors are typically the ones that are looking if the blue eyes of your main character stay blue the whole book,
right. Yeah.
and this character's name stays written the exact same, especially for those fantasy worlds where you are getting those more interesting spellings and those uncommon names.
Yeah.
We're the ones that are flagging all of that information. And typically we make a style sheet, and the
Ah,
style sheet will have all of the rules that we're following, which rules we're breaking to keep the writer's style, because we do that. There are the rules, but we break them if your author voice is a specific way, just to make sure that it's maintained. We still obviously try and make it make sense and flow well. But yeah, it details all of your character names, their descriptions, their roles, the place names, their descriptions, all of the new words, new terms. Like we have a complete list of that.
wow.
And then we get to give that to the author afterwards. So if they're writing a series, now they have a reference as well where they can go, oh, book one had all of this. Okay, I can apply that to book two and it will be consistent.
Wow. Now I know what a style sheet is. I didn't know that before. That's really good. But that's a lot of work. That is a lot of work, isn't it? A lot of extra notation that you've got to take, and potentially a different file to keep all that information in. That's a lot of work. That's amazing. I didn't know that. That's fantastic. So, all right, copy it. Anything else you want to add to copying before we move on to proofreading?
I think that's it.
Okay, that's good. Let's talk about proofreading then, because I suppose when I spoke to other editors before, we were talking about earlier on about editing can be quite expensive, and I asked the question, if a writer had a budget, out of all of the types of editing, which would be the best one to go for if they couldn't do the whole lot? And their answer to that was proofreading. Would you agree with that?
No.
Okay, go on then. That's good.
Okay, proofreading isn't meant as a replacement edit.
Right.
Proofreading is the final pass to make sure nothing has slipped through the
Mm.
cracks. So that's after you have your alpha readers, your beta readers, it's after your self-editing rounds, it's after a professional edit before. So there's familiarity the more you read a book, as I said. And
Yeah.
with that familiarity, your brain starts to automatically fill in those spaces.
Right.
So that proofread should be catching anything everybody else was too familiar with the manuscript to catch. I think proofreaders, if anything, when trying to maintain a budget, can be replaced by beta readers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
explain.
Yeah.
So my most important one for advice for authors on a budget is to get a stylistic copy combo edit. That is your most important, because that is your sentences, your paragraphs, your words. It's how everything is conveyed, and it's making sure everything is consistent. And without that, your story won't grab them
Mm.
enough to care about what proofreaders are catching. So what I suggest for authors trying to keep on a budget is after they're done that first draft, they can either get a couple of alpha readers, 2 or 3, to go through that manuscript and catch those big issues like
Yeah.
plot and characters,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
Do their self-editing, and then you could get, well, the alpha readers kind of act as a developmental editor
Mm.
if you don't get a developmental editor, because they are looking for those things. They're not as trained, they might not write that letter, but they are looking for those things. Then it's, yeah, up to you in your self-edits. Then I would go probably into beta readers round 1. And they're going to catch any other big issues that are there. They're going to start catching those kind of sentence level issues and transitions and flow problems. Then you do your self edits. Then you go to your stylistic copy combo edits. And that will clean up a lot of your mess. You do your self edits, and then you go into beta reader round 2. And beta reader round 2 acts as those proofreaders who catch anything that kind of slipped through the cracks or something that got introduced after the edit was done during self-edits or whatever. And then, yeah, you move on to your advanced readers and go from there. So that's the way I see it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And actually, I think that's on your website, isn't it? That kind of that process, that editing process. I think that's great. That's really good because it's often when you. So I was going to ask you, and I might as well ask you now. When someone contacts you, unless it says on your website for them to check the box that they think the type of editing is the one that they want. Do you find that people often get the wrong type of editing then when they need a line edit as opposed to a copy edit? Is that a common thing?
Yes and no. There's a lot of authors who will just check that they don't know. And with that one, you can check off multiples. So some of them will check all of them off. Or some of them will do that stylistic edit, and then I'll do a sample edit, and most of my authors go for a stylistic copy combo edit.
Wow.
Just because it is that one pass. Well, I don't do one pass, I do a couple of passes when I edit, just to catch all of those things.
Right. Is that the kind of 2 to 3 weeks then? Is that sort of that time frame for that?
Yeah.
But again, that's absolutely perfect, isn't it? I mean, really, I suppose that's the thing that most authors want to know, isn't it? Is the story right? Does it sound good? Is it laid out exactly as it should be? Has it got the right pacing? Is the story moving forward? Yeah, absolutely. That's what it should be. So, when you're reporting back to authors with those, is it the same sort of process? You do it with comments in Google Docs, or you write an email or notes? How do you do that?
My edits, so typically I'll do one pass, and I'm kind of, as I go, I catch whatever mistakes I can, but it's more of that's my first impression as a reader. There are editors that just read through and then kind of mark notes where their attention lagged or whatever. And then their second pass will actually be their editing pass. But I combine my first reader impression with an edit just so that when I am reading a sentence that doesn't quite make sense, I'm catching it. So second read through, I don't read it and go, oh, I already know how this goes. Again, familiarity.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do all of my edits the first time. And then the second round, now that I have the context of the whole book, I can change some of my edits to reflect knowledge that comes in later or comes before, to make sure everything is cohesive. And just to make sure I didn't introduce anything that's wrong.
Yeah.
Because now I also have a better idea of how that author tells their story. So now it's, oh, actually, I saw this later on in the book, like 10 chapters from this point, and this is how they approached it. So now I'm going to change this edit to reflect how they approach this thing. And that's also in my comments and my explanations. Round 2 is, I made this edit. This is why. Later on, you wrote this. and this is what I'm thinking for this, or
Mm.
this is why I made that edit, to make sure later on that really gets highlighted. And then pass 3 is just to make sure that my second round is clean, all of the comments make sense, and it's just as easy to understand and follow as possible.
Yeah. So do you read through an entire manuscript first before you start your work, or do you start, get it, and just go for it?
I just go for it.
Is there a reason for that? But do you, I mean, I suppose then, having said that, that kind of allows you to be sort of objective where you perhaps haven't then become familiar with the story. Maybe perhaps that is perhaps a good, better way of doing it. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. So when should an author reach out to an editor? Should they reach out right at the beginning, so they've written a few chapters? Because I know you do the 3 chapter edit, but then you also do 1,000 words as for free as well. So should an author reach out to you after they've written sort of 3 or 4 chapters and start from there?
Um, it depends on every author. Like the first 1,000 word sample edit is so that they can see if I'm the right fit for them.
Hmm,
And I can also see if I'm the right fit for them.
right.
Because as an editor, that's also my job. I need to make sure that whatever their book is, I am interested. I do have the knowledge of reading that genre, editing that genre to do the best job I can. Because if their genre is something I don't read or edit, I'm not going to take it.
Sure. So do you have, so I suppose the next question, obvious one, is then which genres do you work within?
I do new adult, young adult, fantasy, romantasy, and adventure.
Wow, not sci-fi. Hmm.
No,
Yeah, okay. That's good. So are those of particular, those genres of your particular interest then? You enjoy reading those?
I absolutely love reading them.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Because I mean, I suppose as an editor, you've got to be a reader as well, as we are as writers. I mean, I read every day. I'm actually reading about 3 different books at the same, not exactly the same time, but I'm reading three different books, actually from people who I've spoken to on the podcast, because they're fantastic authors. They got some great books out. So yeah, I'm reading those all, and again, they're different. I've read a memoir recently. I'd never read a memoir before. That was fascinating. Do you do non-fiction editing, or is it all fiction that you do?
I have done a nonfiction book. It was actually the first book I ever edited was a memoir,
Wow, okay.
but I don't edit nonfiction anymore. That one was kind of before I had my education because I have a graduate certificate in publishing,
Hmm.
which covered all of my editing courses. But
Yeah.
before I got into that, I did the memoir.
Wow. So is non-fiction is not something that you'd want to do again, or maybe further on down the line, you just prefer fiction?
Yeah.
Okay, that's really good. So what do you provide any other services like writing coaching, for example? Do you do that as well, or is it just purely editing that you do?
I'm not trained as a coach, but I do have one client that I am working with. So if people were interested, I would be willing and I'd figure out a cost based on the fact that I do not have an education in it.
Sure. But
Mhm.
then, yeah, I think you're an editor. So you've got the technical skills, you've got the technical background, you know what to look for in a story, you know how a story should start and end and what happens in between. So I think you've probably got the skills without the big piece of paper that says that you've got the skills, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's so. So somebody could reach out to you and say, "Can you help me get from A to Z and get this book out?" So you would be happy to consider that.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So you do all the different types of editing. You may be up for doing some coaching, which is great. So how does somebody then do they reach you just via your website? And what's your availability? Because some of the editors that I've spoken to, they're not available for months down the road, which is kind of why I asked the question earlier on about, when should an author get in touch with you? Because if you're busy for the next 2 months, then ooh, that could be a little bit difficult.
I guess I never truly answered that question for when to get in touch. Um, for authors, it is different. I don't recommend a first 3 chapter edit
Mhm.
until probably first draft is done, just
Right.
because after you self-edit, a lot of things are going to change.
Yeah.
So if you want more bang for your buck, as the saying goes, then yeah, you'll want to do your self-editing passes. You'll want to see if even your first chapter does stay, because some people cut the first chapter because the action doesn't start till chapter 2.
Right.
So since there's so much variation in those first 3, it is good to have that first draft, do those self-edits. But as you are doing your first draft, it is good to start researching your editors, because there are so many out there and you want to find the right fit for you.
Yeah.
So you can have editors mostly do sample edits. So you can send it out to 5 different editors and go, hey, can you do this? And then get it back, see how they edit, see if it works for you. And if their edits do make sense, if it is encouraging, if whatever fits. So that is very good to start reaching out earlier, because then
Right.
if none of those editors are a fit for you, you're going to need to start looking. And you don't want to do that after your first draft is done and you have this timeline in your head of, oh, I want to publish in like 6 months. You're not going to be able to find an editor that you want that's within your budget and can actually fit you in their schedule and get it done on time for you to do self-edits and do the marketing necessary to get it done by that publishing date. So as I kind of go, it's start looking early. You don't need to decide super early, but definitely have it in mind. Reach out to the editors, have that conversation going, see what their availability is. Because if they are booking a year out, 2 years out, they're not going to work for your timeline.
No, sure.
So do your research.
Yeah. Get out there.
Go from there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, Ashley, then, so how can people get hold of you now, and what's your availability now?
I have a lot of people reach out to me on Instagram, but I do prefer they go to my website just because I do have a lot of information on there.
Yeah.
I have tried to make it as informational as possible. And I have my intake form, which will help me help the authors.
Yeah.
I'll be able to see kind of what they're expecting, what they value. I'll have that, okay, I know their genre, I know their word count, I know the overview of what the book's about. So I can have that better understanding if I do a sample edit of, okay, this is the context I'm looking at, this is what they value the most. So you can reach out to me on my website, fill out my intake form. You can reach out to me on Instagram, or you can just straight email me.
Well, that's great. Listen, Ashley, thank you so much for coming tonight. I've learned a lot. I've got some real golden nuggets of information written down just here. Thank you so much for that. It's been a real pleasure. And I wish you all the very best of luck with your wedding that's coming up. And again, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, I will make sure that everybody has got all the information that they need to when they want to get in contact with you, your website and Instagram. All the links will be in the description. So Ashley, thank you so much for coming. And thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me. I had a lot of fun.
That's good. You're very welcome. Thank you very much. And hopefully I'll get to speak to you again soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on another captivating episode of the Page Turnerz podcast. We hope you enjoyed delving into the pages with us, discovering new stories, and revisiting beloved classics. If you're as passionate about books as we are, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback keeps us bringing you fascinating discussions, author interviews, and book recommendations. Remember, the adventure never ends when you have a book in hand. Until next time, keep turning those pages and let the magic of storytelling continue to inspire your imagination. Happy reading.